Anyway, let's go ahead and get to No Face Killer's video. He dropped a $69 bill on this one. So I got to play the whole damn thing. So let's put the PC shot on. Ancient Angel Magic by Sefer Ha-Razim. Book Secrets of Jewish Magic. Oh, everybody take notes. Is everybody ready? Here we go. Let's listen. Esoterica, Book of Magic.
Prohibitions are often revelatory. By prohibiting, we're often given a view into what was actually being done, as through a kind of negative image. This is especially instructive when thinking about the history of magic. For instance, in the Hebrew Bible, often called the Old Testament by Christians, we're given about half a dozen instances of prohibitions around magical practices.
Now,
prohibitions reveal...
I don't know why this rabbi is coming out and saying some of these secrets out here, but there's a reason why Jewish people seem to be smarter, they seem to be more intuitive, they seem to manifest things into reality. All right? Listen! And by the way, I'm not Jewish, I just think that people need to listen to what the fuck Jews are doing. I'm just saying.
Actually being done, then we can only conclude that magic was commonly practiced in a culture. This situation produces a kind of paradox. While the letter of the law means that magical practice carries the ultimate sanction, we read in Exodus 22:18 that Machashefa lo teche, translated simply, do not let a sorceress live, or in the more classical King James translation, suffer not a witch to live. Thus, if we're told that sorceresses must not be allowed to live, we can only conclude that many did in fact live. The prohibition and the severity of its sanction practically guarantee it. While Jewish magic may seem like something of a paradox, there can be no doubt that such practices survived and thrived right alongside ancient Israelite priests and later rabbinical authority. In this episode, we're going to explore a very early book of Jewish magic. In fact, it's one of the earliest surviving books of magic in the Western world.
Ezekiel?
Known as the Sefer Ha-Razim, or the Book of Secrets, revealed
the Book
Noah
of Secrets.
By the appropriately named angel Raziel. Raziel is Hebrew for the secret of God, and subsequently passed down through the ages, surviving into Europe to this day. Here we find cosmology, angelology, and Greco-Egyptian magic mixed into a magical practice for everything from influencing horse races, to interrogating the sun to predict future events, to curing headaches, and silencing your enemies. This text prefigures much of the magical practices that will flourish in the European Middle Ages, and serves as a kind of bridge from late classical magic to the ritual magic of the medieval period. So let's explore this fascinating text of Jewish magic, the Sefer Ha-Razim, or the Book of Secrets. I'm Dr. Justin Sledge, and welcome to Esoterica.
All right, let's listen to it, Rabbi.
History, philosophy, and religion.
Let's hear about it. What you got, Rabbi? Ancient angel magic. Notice all the Egyptianology that you're seeing. Egyptology, I meant to say. All over. There's a pentagram.
The Sefer Ha-Razim was one of thousands of fragments stored in the Geniza of the Ibn Ezra synagogue in Cairo, Egypt. As you may know, Jewish texts simply cannot be thrown away for reasons of religious respect. Rather, texts are stored in a Geniza, or storehouse, to await being ritually buried. Luckily, the texts held in the Geniza of the Ibn Ezra synagogue were never buried, as centuries, even a millennium, passed. Over 400,000 texts were discovered there in the late 19th century, and they are still being pored over by scholars to this very day. It was in this massive collection of texts that Mordechai Margaliot discovered several texts seeming to share similar structures, themes, and language. It was over the course of 3 years, from 1963 to 1966, that he reconstructed this ancient magical manuscript.
Now, this is very interesting. 1963 to 1966. Wasn't that many of the wars that Israel had with Egypt at the time, around that particular time? Like the 7-Day War and shit. Wasn't that around that time? Very interesting.
For Ha-Razim, or the Book of Secrets. Scholars date the original text to the 3rd or 4th centuries of the Common Era on linguistic and cultural grounds. The text seems to be the weaving together of two distinct literary and magical genres. On the one hand, the structure of the heavens and the angelology found present in the text reflect the Merkabah/Hechalot literature of the late classical Jewish world. In this form of Jewish mysticism, the mystic descends, not ascends, through the various heavenly palaces and must present complicated passwords and seals to the various angelic gatekeepers and pass closer and closer to the divine throne room.
Now, this is very interesting. Seals. You know, now, this is symbolism. This is utterly symbolism is what he's talking about.
Once there, the mystic is given a vision of the divine body measured with exact preciseness, and in some texts even allowed to sit on the divine throne themselves. This form of pre-Kabbalistic mysticism survives in a handful of texts from the late classical period and was the dominant form of Jewish mysticism for hundreds of years prior to the publication of the Sefer Ha-Zohar and the rise of the Kabbalah. I've made a separate video exploring this form of mysticism at length. If you're interested in that, click the card above and check that out.
Yeah, now what he's talking about, if you want to go further, is the Kabbalah. The Kabbalah is definitely hardcore black magic, Jewish black magic, the Kabbalah. Remember when Madonna said that she was getting all into the Kabbalah and all that bullshit? That's why that bitch can't leave the spotlight. That's why even though this bitch is a 65-year-old bag, she's still trying to spread open her ass cheeks as if she's still 25 or something. And nobody cares, nobody's watching her, nobody listens, and yet she doesn't go away. That kind of shit. Same shit with Lady Gaga. All right? I mean, that's why these people can't go away. All right, let's go back to this rabbi.
The second type of literature at work in the Sefer Ha-Razim is the highly syncretistic magical literature of the late classical period, preserved in the vast corpus of texts that we now call the Greek magical papyri. In this literature, Jewish, Christian, and indigenous Egyptian religion is fused into a complex amalgamation.
Now, I am very glad this rabbi is admitting that the Jewish religion is an eclectic religion that is comprised of everything that worked within the experience of the Jewish culture. For instance, when the Jews lived under the Egyptians, they took elements of what worked for the Egyptians and incorporated it into their religion. When they were under the rule of the Greeks and the Romans, the same shit. So it's very interesting to finally hear a rabbi admit this.
A wide range of ends by invoking angels, demons, gods, goddesses, from Thoth to Hermes to Hecate to Christ to the Jewish God, and uses a range of magical technologies from magical words, symbols, lamellas, fumigations, magical potions, and on.
Now, the Jewish symbols, like Hebraic language, they are now being used to conjure up formulas for jet propulsion and nuclear technology and shit like that. And the symbols that are being used were actually Hebraic symbols that meant explosion, that meant flying and shit like that. It's very unbelievable if you really look into what, Jewish symbolism and Hebraic language has done to science.
This highly syncretistic magic reflects the ancient melting pot that was late classical Egypt. I've also made a separate episode exploring Greco-Egyptian magic at length as well. You can click the card above to check that out too. So what we have in the Sefer Ha-Razim is a mixture of both Jewish Merkava mysticism mixed with the syncretistic magic of the Greco-Egyptian world. It's important to remember that this text was found in Egypt and was likely produced there. And again, not only is this one of the earliest texts of Jewish magic, this is also one of the earliest texts of the kind of ritual angelic magic that will go on to flourish in the European Middle Ages. As we have it, the Sefer Ha-Razim is composed of an introduction revealing the history of the work, followed by 7 sections of unequal length describing the various firmaments of the heavens, their respective angelic encampments, and the military-like divisions of the angelic chain of command. And, perhaps most importantly, the various supernatural powers that can be harnessed from the angels by the Magus.
Now, this is why the Jewish religion believes in more than one God. That's why they worship and pray to different deities. There is not one singular deity that the Jewish people pray to. They pray to many different deities. As a result, this is what this rabbi is talking about. It's actually being very honest.
Introduction provides the history and context of the text, which was allegedly first revealed by the angel Raziel to Noah, who himself inscribed it on a sapphire. This idea of inscribing wisdom on a gemstone also persists, especially in the famed alchemical text of the Emerald Tablet of Hermes Trismegistus. According to the introduction, Noah gains cosmological wisdom and magical powers from understanding the text. The Sefer Ha-Razim is then transmitted through the ages, eventually reaching Solomon, who uses it to trap and manipulate demons, a core concept in the history of the Solomonic magic tradition, where it was
Now, he's talking about King Solomon, which is what the Freemasons worship. If you ever go into a Masonic lodge, every Masonic lodge is meant to emulate in every setting possible the Temple of Solomon.
transmitted through the prophets to the sages and down in its current form. Following the introduction, the various firmaments or layers of heaven, their angelic encampments, and the powers of those angels are systematically, if somewhat unevenly, revealed. And what I want to do now is take a look at a couple of sections in depth to give you some sense of the heavenly architecture and the numerous and varied angels that populate them alongside the magical powers that one may acquire. The second firmament, or heaven, is said to be full of terror and inhabited by countless divisions of angels. You'll notice here the very militaristic organization of the angelic hierarchy. This second heaven is further divided into 12 sublayers.
Just play the rest of this Jew, please. Jesus Christ.
Malot, as the text calls them. This can be translated as something like divisions or steps, with each malah having between 9 and 20 angelic guardians, themselves having a commanding officer. It is possible, the text tells us, to approach these various guardians of the malot. That is to say, one's heart must be purified of sin, and one must further refrain from wine, from meat consumption, and avoiding, for instance, people who are menstruating. And in such a state...
Yeah, now you heard that, right? That's what Hasidic Jews believe.
I also pray to many gods. Porter Rockwell, Keith Redford, Thomas Albean, Jason Delian.
All right, well, hopefully they answer you, dude. Hopefully they answer you. Let's get back to the Jew.
And make use of their supernatural powers. For instance, the sixth malah contains 17 different angels which the text names. And we are told that these various angels are humble, yet their faces are, quote, full of glory. We are then given a magical spell which will allegedly cure someone suffering from a stroke, or as the text have it, when half their body has shriveled up. The Sefer Ha-Razim tells us, quote, take spikenard oil and 3 measures of honey and stand facing the sun as it rises, repeating 3 times each day for 7 days the name of the man and the name of his mother, and the name of the angels that stand upon the 6th step. And on the 7th day, take him and stand him naked before the sun, and smear oil all over his flesh, while burning myrrh and frankincense. We are then told to take a silver lamella, or silver plate, and inscribe upon it the names of the various angels and several magical characters, and then to hang that lamella with a cord of asbestos and several different spices. And if we do so,
a cord of asbestos,
we will, quote, succeed, according to the Sefer Ha-Razim. Here we have a relatively complex spell involving the use of a magical ointment, a suffumigation, along with the use of angelic names, and a silver lamella, along with a series of characters which populate much of the Greek magical papyri and survive to this day in European magic. I've made a separate episode exploring the history of these magical characters if you'd like to check that out. It's also worth noticing here that this must be done on a specific day of the month, probably leaning somewhat into astrological practices. Another spell involving angels from the third heaven allow one an edge in horse racing or chariot racing.
An edge in chariot and horse racing.
If you want to race horses even when they are exhausted, so they will not stumble in their running, and that they will be as swift as the wind, and that the foot of no living thing will pass them, and that they will win popularity in their running, take a silver lamella and write upon it the names of the horses, and
all right, hold on just a second.
The names of the prince.
Hold on, silver lamella, and write upon it the names of the horses, and the names of the angels, and the name of the prince who is over them, and say, I adjure you, angels of running, who run amid the stars, that you will grid with strength and courage the horses that N is racing, and his charioteer who is racing them. Let them run, and not become weary, nor stumble. Let them run, and be swift as an eagle. Let no animal stand before them, and let no other magic or witchcraft affect them. Take the lamella and conceal it in the horse racing lane of the one you wish to win. Why is there a trans there? All right, I'm turned off now. Forget it.
Who is over them, and say thus, I adjure you, angels of running, who run the stars, that you will gird with strength and courage the horses that N is racing, and his charioteer who is racing.
Hold on, pause this.
Jewish angelology is the true source of Jesus. Early Christians believed Jesus was never on earth and was crucified in heaven by Satan and his sky demons. St. Paul was a schizo that had hallucinations of Jesus. Jesus was never a real man.
I disagree with that 15 and a half inches of pure imagination. I disagree with that.
Many of them.
Play the rest of this Jew.
And not become weary nor stumble. Let them run and be as
Oh yeah, by the way,
eagle.
pause this. There are at least 4 different historians, Roman historians, that wrote of Jesus. Look those up, all right? Jesus actually existed. Play it.
No animals stand before them, and let no other magic or witchcraft affect them. We are then told to take that lamella and conceal it in the racing lane of the horses that you wish to win. So a couple of things are very interesting to me about this spell. The first linking between
the reason we're watching this is because No Face Killer dropped a $69 bill so that we can watch this, all right? So just, just sit there and learn something.
Angels here of the third firmament, which drive the stars along their path, to those which will drive the horse that you wish to win. Again, what we have here is a very classical linking of the macrocosm with the microcosm. The macrocosmic angels, which cause the stars to run on their course, will give the horses at the microcosmic level the power to continue running even if they are exhausted. That not only will the angels provide the horses the ability to win, it will protect them from any other interference from other forms of magic and witchcraft, which tells me that there's an entire culture of cursing and counter-cursing going on here at the level of horse racing in the ancient world. This text is also
cursing and counter-cursing.
One discovered by Mordechai Margoliot that led him to the reconstruction of the Sefer Ha-Razim back in 1963 to 1966. As I mentioned, the spells in Sefer Ha-Razim range in complexity and detail. There are erotic binding spells, sometimes referred to as love spells, spells for interrogating ghosts, for reversing court decisions, for giving your enemies insomnia, for returning safely from war, for creating illusory fire, even seemingly banal things like lighting an oven on a cold day or curing a headache. There's even a spell for seeing the sun at night involving a prayer to the Greek god Helios. What's interesting about this prayer is that despite being in a book of Jewish magic written in Hebrew letters, the underlying text is in fact Greek. So we can see that the text and its magic really run the gamut. Further, the angels that populate this text are also variously interesting. As we've seen with the Greek prayer to the god Helios, while Jewish, the text remains significantly syncretistic. Another example of this is an angel mentioned in the fourth encampment of the first firmament. And that angel's name is apparently Christos, spelled in Hebrew letters, but reflecting the Greek name Christ.
Christ, yeah, I was going to say Christos or Christ.
Some other angels which appear in the text include the fourth step of the third firmament. Here we see two interesting Jewish figures.
Amadeus.
One appears to be Bar Kokhba or Bar Koziba, the name of the Messianic Jewish leader Shimon Bar Kokhba, who led the rebellion against the Romans ending in 135 of the Common Era. In the same encampment, we also find what appears to be the demon, not angel, Asmodeus, who's famous from his appearance in the apocryphal book of Tobit, but can also be
Asmodeus.
found in
I didn't mean to be
Talmud
dyslexic there.
Jewish lore. Here we find an interesting range of syncretisms. We find Jewish figures, we find Jewish demons, we find the name of Christ, but also we're just as likely to find invocations involving Hermes and Helios, literally written out in Greek language. As the mystic or magician climb to the various seven heavens, the text finally ends on the seventh and highest heaven. Here dwell the sacred Chayot, along with the throne of God itself. What's interesting about the seventh heaven is that there is no magic here to be employed by the
Seventh
Magus.
heaven.
Rather, the Magus is given a beatific vision
like
of
there's
the
7 days in a
beauty
week.
and power of the divine. The final section of the Sefer Ha-Razim is filled with a hymn extolling the fearful glory of God, typical of many of the hymns to be found in the mystical Jewish literature of this time. So in some sense, while magic and angels dominate the first 6 heavens, it is the glory of God alone that dominates the 7th. The Sefer Ha-Razim is a fascinating window onto both Jewish magical practices of late antiquity and the text serves as a kind of bridge between the magic of the late classical world and the ritual angelic/demonic magic that would dominate in the European context. Indeed, it appears that the text would eventually be translated into Arabic, and a Latin translation will be made at some point, in its Codex Latinos number 745. I've included a link to a digital version of that manuscript in Latin in the description below if you'd like to explore it. So we can see that the Sefer Ha-Razim has had a very, very long history. Being composed in the 3rd or 4th century of the Common Era, it would eventually be translated into Arabic and survive into the Arabic milieu, eventually reaching Europe and being translated into Latin, and no doubt influencing the angelic/demonic magic that will become so important in the European context.
Now,
Indeed,
he keeps talking about
argued
demonic
that the
magic
Sefer
in the
Ha-Razim,
European
either directly
context.
or indirectly, is the longest continuously influential magical textbook. If you want to check out the text of the Sefer Ha-Razim for yourself, I would pick up a copy of Michael Morgan's translation. It's relatively inexpensive, has a pretty strong introduction, along with careful footnotes. Of course, the Hebrew edition of Margoliot is also available, but probably needs to be updated given the discovery of more recent manuscripts. The Hebrew of the Sefer Ha-Razim isn't terribly difficult, so even with a few semesters of college-level Hebrew, one can find this text relatively accessible. Though I will say that many of the angelic names are somewhat obscure. This is part of a series here at Esoterica on historical books of magic. And if that interests you, I hope you'll subscribe, consider supporting Esoterica on Patreon or via
Anyway, he is kind of getting to some of the crux of the matter. When he talks about European demonic magic, this is the magic that was used by the English to be able to conquer the world at the time. Elizabeth I, which was the queen of the first conquest of England on its imperialist strategy on the world, Elizabeth I actually used the spiritual advice of a guy by the name of John Dees. And John Dees, if you look him up, he was a notorious magician. And because of John Dees being the literal right-hand man of Elizabeth I, this is why Elizabeth and England had so much power, and it looked as if a nuit coeptus, granted their enterprise with success. And that's where Aleister Crowley, believe it or not, read a lot of John Dee's work. That's where John Dees read a lot of the work of this particular rabbi that he just specifically went through, is in the School of Oxford, believe it or not. I hate to use the term Oxford considering we just saw that shooting in Michigan, but Oxford University in Britannia, I think it started in the, 1063 or whatever the hell it was. The library has all kinds of different spiritual books that were written throughout the ages, and this is where Aleister Crowley got his first introduction into how to conjuring up spirits, how to use symbolism, and the things that this rabbi was just discussing. Yes, John Dees, that's his name, John Dees. All right, hey, No Face Killer, thank you very much for that one, man. Cheers to you. And it seems like some people got a little bit something out of it. Others are just waxing their carrots. So